Hey y'all, my name is Jenny. I lead new leader training at Radford University, and I also hang out with Young Life College. So if you haven't seen me around, here I am. If I have seen you around, what's up? The past couple of Tuesdays, or we've been doing Tuesday talks every night, or every Tuesday night, or Monday morning, or Wednesday morning, or Saturday maybe, if that's when you're watching it. We're just happy you're here, happy that you're hanging out with us, and yeah. So if you have any questions and or whatever about this, just let us know. Anyway, for the past couple weeks, we have been talking about Jesus and who he is, and a question that Emily's talked the last couple times. She's talked about how we are meant to be in a relationship with Jesus. We have a lot of fear and shame um, that living this life, and we are not, it's not supposed to be that way. So tonight I'm going to talk to you guys about a little bit more of that. But before I begin that, I wanted to tell you guys a little bit about myself. I am so when I was younger, used to be a competitive cheerleader from like grades, like third grade to like my junior year of high school. I was a competitive cheerleader with like the whole shebang, like if the Bring It On movies with the glitter, the hair, the makeup, big curls, the uniform, the sparkly uniforms, like that was me. That's what I did. And that was like my thing. I loved it. It was so fun. And I miss it a lot. Anyway, so when I was I think I was in 6th grade when this happened. I would go to a lot of cheerleading competitions with my best friend and her mom. And so like our competitions weren't always local. They were like usually a couple hours away, or sometimes we would travel to different states. Like we used to go to New Jersey, Georgia, Florida, South Carolina, North Carolina, all these different places all the time. Well, this particular time that I'm mentioning was in Richmond, Virginia. This competition was in Richmond at VCU. And so we were in Richmond, and I'm from Norfolk, Virginia, so that's about like a 2-hour drive. It'd be from like driving to here to like Stanton, I guess. Or maybe not. I'm not sure if that's 2 hours. Anyway, but it's a 2-hour drive, and anyway, so we get to Richmond, and I like go open my bag up. They'd picked me up that morning, and I had packed my bag myself. We're getting ready. We're about to put on our hair, or sorry, not our hair. We're about to do our hair, put on our makeup, and put on our uniforms to get ready to compete that day. It's about like 9 a.m., and I realize that my cheer skirt isn't in my bag. You have 2 parts to your uniform, your top and the bottom. And I did not have my bottom. And at the time, I wasn't on a team with a lot of people, so there wasn't like an extra girl that could like let me borrow her skirt. I needed mine. Plus, I needed to be able to fit it. And so I was afraid that I was like so embarrassed because I was like, it's not here. Like I searched for it and searched for it. And then I finally had to tell my best friend's mom, hey, I forgot my skirt. And I was so upset. So afraid that we were going to have to tell our coach, and that I was going to get in trouble because I didn't have my cheer skirt. My best friend's mom was like, you need to call your mom and see if she can bring it. And I wasn't sure how my mom was also going to react. I didn't think that she was going to take it well and bring my skirt, honestly. So eventually, called my mom a couple times. Eventually, she answered, and I was like, Mommy, I forgot my skirt. Can you drive to Richmond right now and bring it to me? And my mom was like, yeah, I can do that, actually. I wanted to come to this competition anyway. Like, I can do that. So my mom gets ready. Richmond is a 2-hour drive, so at this point, we were going to be going on around 1. My mom left around, like, at this point, it's like 10 a.m. So I'm like, if she hits traffic, like, she could not be here in time. Like, I need her to be here by, like, 1 o'clock. Anyway, so my mom gets ready. She gets there. That 2-hour window where I was waiting for my mom to show up was awful. Everyone was asking me, Jenny, they called me Jen in cheerleading, but Jenny, like, where is your stuff? Like, where's your skirt? Why don't you have your skirt on? And I didn't want to tell anyone because I was ashamed of it. And I was like, oh, I haven't put it on yet. Like, I don't know. My coach was, like, questioning, like, why I didn't have it. It was just this whole dramatic thing, and girls are not nice, and so they were just, like, people were talking, and I was really embarrassed. I had to hold myself back from crying every time someone asked me that, and it sucked a lot. Anyway, so my mom gets there, and she finally gets there, and she's like, "Have your skirt, like it's gonna be great, you're gonna be fine." But when I saw her, I was afraid of her being mad. My mom could get really mad, but this time she wasn't mad. She was like, "I have it, it's gonna be okay," because she could. I think when she saw me, she could tell that I was just like this little ball of anxiety and stress, and she just took mercy on me. We went in the bathroom, I changed. We did like touch ups on my hair and makeup, and it was great. And then my mom ended up staying and watching me compete, which is not something she usually did. Also, we ended up winning first place. But that feeling of that anxiety that I was feeling, that anxiousness, that shame that I was feeling, the embarrassment, it was awful. And I remember that day. Like, I still think about that from time to time, of just like, I hated feeling that way. And I knew that I wasn't supposed to be feeling that way. I thought if I was just more responsible, or if I would have just, like, had my mom double check my bag, if I wasn't as stubborn and say I could do it on my own, like, all these things wouldn't be happening. I was just trying to think of ways how I could prevent that in the future. And just ways for me to not think of that shame, or think of that, like, all those terrible feelings that I was feeling. So I bring this story up because I mentioned a little bit ago that Emily has been talking about that. Like, we weren't supposed to be feeling that way. Like, life was not intended for us to feel ashamed all of the time. We were created to be in a relationship with God. And when sin entered into the world, that relationship was severed. And, like, all these things have been happening. And so that's why we experience shame and guilt and all these different things. And so tonight I'm going to talk about these people in the Bible who are also feeling shame and anxiety, and they're just afraid. So just something to think about before I start to read it is all of us are afraid of something, and we want the pain from our fears and anxieties to stop. We all look for something to make it go away and a way to make it stop. And in that moment when I was feeling those things, I was just trying to distract myself. I was off in the bathroom a lot. I was just trying to find a way for all those things to stop. So we're going to read a story in the Bible about people who were feeling a similar way as me. I'm reading out of Mark 5, starting in verse 21. So just to set the scene a little bit, Jesus has been traveling around telling people about who he is, and he's been going around healing people and saving people and doing these crazy things. So Jesus always had a crowd around him. He traveled around with his friends who were called the disciples, and the religious leaders hated him, the Pharisees. So those are important things to remember as I'm reading this, or as we go through this. Alright, so when Jesus had again crossed over by boat to the other side of the lake, a large crowd gathered around him while he was by the lake. And then one of the synagogue leaders named Jairus came. When he saw Jesus, he fell at his feet. He pleaded earnestly with him. "My daughter is dying. Please come and put your hands on her, so that she may be healed and live." So Jesus went with him. So in this moment, we see Jairus, who he is a religious leader, and they were known for hating God, or for hating Jesus, sorry. They were known for hating Jesus because Jesus was coming around and teaching with authority and messing up the status quo, and essentially, like, the religious leaders hated that because they were in charge and they didn't want someone to mess with. They wanted Jesus to be on their team, but he was hanging out with the social outcasts, the people that you didn't typically, like, hang out with, the people that the marginalized, and they hated that. So Jairus, being the religious leader that he was so desperate in this moment because his daughter is dying. And when he sees Jesus, he's like, "Hey, can you please help me?" Because he had heard about all the things Jesus had been doing. He was so desperate enough that he thought this was like his last resort. He wasn't sure who else to turn to because he didn't want to see his little daughter die. So we're going to keep going. A large crowd followed and pressed around him. A woman who a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years. She had suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors and had spent all that she had, yet instead of getting better, she grew worse. She heard about Jesus. When she heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak, because she thought, if I could touch his clothes, then I would be healed. Immediately her bleeding stopped, and she felt it in her body that she was freed from her suffering. So, in this particular scene, we see Jairus, and Jairus is like, please come help me, like, heal my daughter. And so they had to, like, go to Jairus' house, and they're like, Jesus is just coming off the boat, and I'm sure Jairus' house wasn't super close, and all these people are crowding around, and it's a big crowd, which is something that we can't be in nowadays. R.I.P. But so just imagine, like, all these people, like, just being around, and then we see this woman who had been sick for 12 years. She'd been bleeding for 12 years, and she thought, if I just touch Jesus, I will be healed, which is, like, crazy to have that kind of faith, because she was just so desperate in that moment. She was just like, I am willing to do anything to be healed, because all the people that all the people that she had tried to get help from didn't help her before. So we see that she was afraid and tired, and she thought, maybe if I do this one thing, I can be healed. So, anyway, so she touched his cloak, and then she was healed, and we see that, and that's just crazy. So I'm going to keep on going. At once Jesus realized that the power had gone out of him. He turned around in the crowd and asked, "Who touched my clothes?" "You see, the people crowding against you," said his disciples answered, "and yet you asked who touched me?" But Jesus kept looking around to see who had done it. The woman, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell at his feet, trembling with fear, and told the whole truth. He said, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering." Okay, so we just seen a couple minutes ago, she touched Jesus' clothes and was healed. And now Jesus knows what happened. He knows the power went out of him, and somebody was healed. And I think Jesus knew who it was, because he's 100% God and 100% man. And God is all-knowing. So I think Jesus already knew who it was, but he wanted her to come up and say it. And anyway, so they're in this huge crowd, though, and people are probably, like, all touching up against him. Like, if you've ever been to a crowded concert, you know that people are just touching up against you, and you never know who's actually touching you. And so his disciples are like, "Why are you asking? Like, there's all these people who are touching you. Like, what are you talking about?" But Jesus is like, "No, like, I need to know." And the woman, knowing exactly what had happened, comes forward, and she's like, probably scared out of her mind, because remember, before, all the people that she had gone to help her weren't nice to her and didn't help her. And also, like, back in that time, when you were sick, you were, like, labeled as an outcast, and nobody ever touched you. Nobody ever associated yourself with you, because it was just, like, bad to associate yourself with people who were sick, people who were different. And this woman was different, because she had been sick for so long. So she's probably terrified when the person who she touched and just, like, instantly got saved from, she's probably terrified, and she's like, "Oh no, what did I just do?" But instead of rebuking her and instead of shaming her, Jesus is like, "Your faith has healed you. You're free. You're able to go be free. You're not going to suffer anymore." He shows mercy on her. He shows mercy to her, which is something that is, like, sometimes, like, when we receive mercy from somebody, that's a feeling that can be foreign to us, because we always expect someone to be mad and react and yell at us. It's rare, or maybe sometimes it can be weird for when you're expecting that, for someone to show mercy on you. So it's kind of like a relief. You're like, wow, like, that really just happened. So mind you, as we're reading this, they were still on their way to help Jairus' daughter. So the disciples are also, like, probably getting a little irritated that Jesus was asking, "Who touched you? Like, what are you talking about? We're, like, going to help this guy. Why are you worried about someone touching you?" So anyway, I'm going to keep going. While Jesus was still speaking, some of the people from the house of Jairus, the synagogue leader, said, "Your daughter is dead. Why bother the teacher anymore?" Overhearing what they had said, Jesus told Jesus told him, "Don't be afraid, just believe." He did not let anyone follow him except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. And when they came home to the synagogue, came to the home of the synagogue leader, Jesus saw a commotion, with people crying and wailing loudly. He went in and said to them, "Why all this commotion and wailing? The child is not dead, but asleep." But they laughed at him. After he put them all out, he took the child's father and mother, and the disciples who were with him, and went in where the child was. He took her by the hand and said, "Talitha kum," which means, "Little girl, I say to you, get up." Immediately the little girl stood up and began to walk around the room, for she was 12 years old. At this, they were completely astonished. He gave strict orders not to let anyone know about this, and told them to give her something to eat. Okay, so, like I had just said, Jesus was walking to Jairus' house. This woman interrupts them, and then we see that in that process, the little girl dies in that process. And when someone comes to say, like, don't bother the teacher anymore, Jesus sees their lack of faith, and she's like, "No, I can still help you." So finally they get to Jairus' house, and Jesus sees everyone mourning, and he's like, "Stop mourning, it's going to be okay." But I don't think they understood that Jesus was still going to heal her. So he sends everyone away, and he goes to where the little girl is, brings her parents and the 3 disciples that he brought with him. She's clearly dead, but he raises her from the dead, and he commands the people in that room to not tell what they had seen. Jesus saved the little girl from death. He saw her parents' sadness and helped them. He had mercy on them and helped them in their distress. So, in this story, we see Jesus heal a woman who had been bleeding for 12 years and a family whose little girl is dying, and he saves her. And then we also see the disciples getting stressed out because Jesus is going against the culture of, like, or what they would think of, like, to help somebody. They would be like, "We can come back for you. Like, right now, we have this urgent thing that we have to do. Why are you stopping?" So, to me, this story can seem a little stressful when you think about it like that, from that point of view of the disciples, of like, why are you stopping and helping this woman? But Jesus is perfect and knows Jesus is 100% God and 100% man. He knows everything that's going to happen. So he takes the time and stops. He takes the time to come in to these people's lives and heal them. He calms their distress and their shame and their anxieties and their fears. He meets them in those places because he loves us and he cares for us. This story, the way that these people are feeling in this story is similar how I felt that day when I left my cheer skirt at home and my mom brought it to me. When my mom got there and came to my rescue and showed me that mercy instead of being mad at me, it was like a huge relief. And I'm so thankful for that day. Because it was a time in my life when someone showed me mercy, and someone came in and made everything better. In this story, Jesus does that for these people. He comes to help them in their time of need. At the beginning I said, we are all afraid of something, and we all are in need of, we all want those fears and anxieties to go away. There's constantly something telling us in this world, telling us that we're not good enough, that we're not strong enough, we're not brave enough, or that you're not good enough to do this, or that when something terrible happens, it just shows us that there's no good in the world. But I do believe that there is. Jesus wants to help us, meet us in those places, and heal us, and be there for us, and calm us, and bring us peace. Us young life leaders believe that Jesus can meet all of our needs, and has worked in my life to help calm my fears and anxieties that I've had in the past, and helps me today with stuff that I deal with now. Jesus is the source of life, and he loves us so much, and he wants us to bring our fears and anxieties to him so he can help us through them. So I hope that as I've been talking tonight, that if there are things that you're thinking about, how could Jesus do this? how could he meet me in my needs? Or how could he meet me in those places? Like, how does that work? And I think that Jesus will, if you let him. So I'm going to pray, and then I'm going to have some questions that you guys can talk about, or you can think about if you're watching this by yourself, or talk about it with the people you're with. So I'm going to pray, and then I'll read. Jesus, I just want to thank you so much for tonight. I thank you that you let us gather together and watch Tuesday Talks with our friends. God, I pray and thank you that you want to meet us in our times of desperation, in our times of fear, and that you want to calm those fears and anxieties for us and show us what real peace is. And God, I pray that we would think about that over this next week, and think about how we can apply that to our lives. So God, we love you so much, and it's in your sweet and glorious name that I pray. Amen. So a couple of questions that I have are, what do you do when you are feeling anxious? And what are ways that you try to cope with your anxieties and your fears? What would it be like to have faith like the bleeding woman? Like we saw in the story that the bleeding woman had this faith that if I just touch him, he'll heal me. So what would it be like to have that type of faith? And how would it feel to be at peace from your fears and anxieties? So guys, hope you enjoyed this talk. I had fun recording it, and I will see you guys around. Have a good one.